Omidvar, Senator, on it.
Thank you, Chair. I must express my dismay at what I have heard. It is unfortunate, and your evidence is compelling, and thank you for being here with us. I'd like to zero in on the direct access model. You have all talked about it. In 1992, I think 1992, as co-chair of the Ontario Human Rights Code Review Task Force, which I co-chaired with Mary Cornish, we made the exact same recommendation, 1992, that direct access model is the way to serve the public. And we made a recommendation that, in fact, direct access model should not take away from studies and on systemic issues and reviews. BC has a direct access model. Ontario now has a direct access model. Are you seeing in what they are doing, are you seeing evidence of real improvement, or is this, again, as what Mr. Sharpe has called, performance versus substance?
Can I start with that? All right. What I would say is that there is some difference, and the reason for that difference is that it enables a direct ability to apply to and to potentially adjudicate a complaint, which is not something that can happen under the present system because there's no direct carriage of the matter by the individual complainant. In other words, the commissioner is the one that has carriage of it, and the commissioner will either carry it or often will simply drop the ball.
And do you have any evidence from BC and Ontario, for instance, although Ontario is new at this, that in fact black complainants in the Ontario system or the BC system are getting heard in a more accessible manner?
What I would say is twofold. Number one is that in part, yes, there is and has been a number of cases at the Human Rights Tribunal in Ontario that have addressed systemic and other issues of concern around anti-black racism. But what I would also say is that what also happens, and a concern we have, is that the tribunal itself builds in its own gatekeeping functions and will enable complaints either to be automatically dismissed if they aren't believed to have meet certain basic requirements, or alternatively will be subject to summary dismissal application processes on almost a routine basis. And that is problematic, and it's happening more and more often, but frankly it's largely happening as a resource management issue. Because right now I can tell you the Commission, especially post-COVID, is basically implementing this almost de facto as of course for almost all complaints because it's so bogged down and backlogged. Right now it takes 8 months to really issue a complaint with the Ontario Tribunal.
And that is my concern, that a recommendation about the direct access model without the words adequately resourced is going to get us into, other challenges and issues. So I wonder if you would agree that if and when a direct access model is implemented, it should be adequately resourced by the federal public.
Absent that, it would be completely ineffective.
All right.
I agree with
Thank you. Mr. Sharpe, I have a question for you. You talked about the experience of racism, anti-black racism, in the federal public service. In your experience, your own or that of your network, do they experience it? Is it overt or covert racism? Because governments have become sophisticated in using language and protocols and processes that you can hardly see, at the end of the road, but it's there. How have your members experienced it?
So, in the federal public service, the black exclusion and denial of opportunities, the racism is very subtle, but it's entrenched in what appears to be normalized and generic processes. So, to put it quite simply, we take the black and brown and racialized out of our processes and then wonder why we don't hire any black and brown people through our processes or they don't advance. We set standards of hirings that oftentimes have the archetype of someone who's, comes from a certain socioeconomic background, oftentimes racialized background, being white, blonde, and blue-eyed. That is the archetype of the model bureaucrat, the model public servant. Someone like me with the hair is not necessarily seen as a good fit for certain roles, in particular leadership. So it's to put it lightly and to put it very, very bluntly, I think you're exactly right. Very subtle, but it is so normalized, and this is what the UN said in its report to Canada after assessing the state of people of African descent here in 2015-2016, that report to Canada in August of 2017. That it's so normalized that people just don't recognize it. So yes, it is definitely, it's one of those things that we have to, when I talk about black inclusion within the public service, is looking at all of our processes, our HR processes, our management processes, our education processes.
I quickly want to ask a question of Mr. Thompson before our very august chair cuts me off. Mr. Thompson, in your opinion, does unconscious bias training work?
Thank you for giving me the hardest question, Senator.
No.
The challenge is that unconscious bias, the term is now being used to excuse bias and racism and discrimination. I did not know that I was discriminating against you. I did not know it was my unconscious bias. Well, that is only further perpetuating the discrimination and the hurt and harm towards black Canadians, and in this case, in the federal government.
Thank you. Thank you.